Hello, friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with Jimmy Ichihana. I first met him at a magic convention where he was jamming pretty hard, learned some cool stuff from him. Then I saw him on Fool Us twice, met him again, or saw him or jammed with him again at another magic convention, and I knew that I had to have him on and talk a little bit about my favorite subject, which is close-up card magic at a table. That's all that I've seen him do, and he's incredible at it. We got to talk about what it's like, how to do it, lessons about it, and the thing that I'm struggling with most right now, which is how to bring the feeling and emotion and the performance style of close-up tabled card magic to a stage. Thankfully, that's exactly what Jimmy is doing right now and learning right now. So I had a really great time on the episode. I think you will too. Here it is, a lovely episode with Jimmy Ichihana. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with a very special guest, someone who I've jammed with a bunch in the past. I've now seen on TV a few times, and now we're going to hear a little bit of behind the scenes. I'm here with Jimmy Ichihana. How are you?
Hello. Doing well. Thank you.
Super excited to have you on. Always cool to see friends on TV twice and talk a little bit about the behind the scenes, but also, before we press record, we were talking about the love for close-up card magic and the struggles with, where to do it, how to do it, when to do it, and everything like that, and all the joys in it. So I'm excited to dive into the world of close-up card magic, mingling table, everything like that. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get into magic?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm a big fan of the podcast, so I appreciate being here. And
Well, thank you.
I
Thank
have
you so
heard all
much.
sorts of good origin stories, and yeah, a lot of similarities for mine. I mean, I had an uncle. So I grew up in New York, and then my dad's side of the family was out in California, and so I had an uncle out in California that showed me a card trick that fooled me badly. But we'd go out to California once every summer, and so then didn't show me how it was done, and go back in another year, and like my cousin knows it now, and so he fools me. Unlike some of your guests who are like, oh, then I sat down and I backtracked how it worked, and I was born the love of my problem solving for magic. I never figured it out, and like probably 5 years go by, and then they finally just explained it to me. But yeah, that card trick really sold it for me. And then early on, I got to go to Cannon's Magic Camp in New York, and that was an incredible summer.
It's always crazy when you realize there's like an entire world of magic you don't know. Like you think it's card tricks and you think it's magic sets. You're like, holy
Yeah,
crap,
yeah,
people,
yeah. I agree.
people do
Yeah,
this.
For folks who didn't grow up in New York, who didn't have the opportunity to go to Tandon, so let me set the scene for the camp, right? So you picture yourself being like 13, 14, and you can sign up to be like beginner, intermediate, or advanced before you show up at the camp, right? And so I've my parents signed me up as intermediate, and I show up and throw my backpack down on the bunk, and my roommate has two doves and a rabbit. I walk into the bathroom, and someone is my memory. Okay, I'm sure that this is a lie now, but my memory is that someone is floating their toothbrush in front of the mirror practicing it, but like I can't tell how it's done. And I immediately go up to my counselor. I'm like, you know what? I saw the forms, and I think my parents made a mistake. I'm supposed to be in the beginner class, and that was yeah,
Like this guy's floating
yeah.
toothbrushes, so I'm not there yet. So that's hilarious. And there's also this really funny thing, when you go to either a magic camp or a magic convention or whatever for the first time, and especially if you're unindoctrinated to the world of magic, and you realize you go from being the only magician in your friend group and that anyone knows to being like just a magician, and you realize you kind of have to have not necessarily defining features, but you become the general again. So you kind of
Yeah.
have to wake up and say, oh, what parts of magic do I like? Who am I in magic? Like, what do I do? Like what, and you start to have those thoughts sometimes.
Yeah, I walked away from that seeing a lot of good magic and knowing that I had a lot to learn.
Totally. And what a great gift to be like fooled bad and welcomed into the world, like what a great moment. So talk to me about how it continued from there.
Yeah, so so that's early on, and that's like middle school grade through high school. Early on, ran into a magic shop that's going out of business, and they sold me a one of Jay Sankey's VHSs. And so some of the first sleight of hand I learned was from one of his VHSs, and like to the point where I knew so little about magic that I didn't understand when he was joking and when he wasn't. So he does in the VH
Right.
in this one, he's doing a trick where he has four slices of bread, and he eats the center out of
Oh
one,
yeah, I
and he does the
know.
Elmsley. And
Yeah.
I didn't know that that was a joke, so I learned the mechanics of the Elmsley count from Jay Sankey with slices of bread, and I was like, "This doesn't really look good. It doesn't look good when I do it. Yeah, it doesn't really look good when he does it, but some of the other stuff looks good on the tape, so I'll give him a pass on this."
It's gotta be true.
Yeah, right?
It's gotta be real.
Maybe it looks good in person.
Oh, that's super funny. How did you like sort of lock in card magic and tell me about that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kinda at the end of high school into college, ended up working at a summer camp, Frenchwood's Performing Arts in, Hancock, New York, where I worked with a couple other magicians, just small, magic department there, and spent 2 full summers just teaching magic to kids, and, they put on a show, like, when their parents arrive, and spending all our free time hanging out and jamming, and I guess at that point I was already pretty much into card magic, but that helps cement it too because it's like a summer spent where like I was the specialist teaching other kids working on it. So I think it's just a function of there's the wealth of material that's available within card magic, that it's as a hobbyist, it's very accessible to begin with. I ran into the Paul Harris books pretty early on, and that will throw you into the rabbit hole of card magic pretty hard if you're so
It's funny, all these moments, like things you discover, and there are these things in magic where like you discover it and everything
yep.
changes again. Like all of that is core examples of that. Discovering Paul Harris
And
books
then
and like
probably oh geez, maybe early in college, there's a really small like IBM group. I went to school in Rochester, New York, and there's a really small IBM group there. But the president at the time was an old professor at the school I was at, and super nice. And like at that point, I had never been to a lecture, and he was just, he would always just show up. He'd give me a ride and say, "Nah, this is too good to miss," and it would just, pay for dinner, pay for me to go see the lecture, and so saw some amazing lectures, right? And I was really close to Buffalo, New York, where they hold the 4F convention, and for folks who don't go to 4Fs, there's a 1 day convention afterwards where it's like all the guys who come in who want to make a few extra dollars to help make the trip a little bit easier stay. And for the people who live in the area, it's just this
right,
incredible convention for nearly nothing. And so
right.
saw some really good shows there. But yeah, early on in college was one of the first time I got to see Tamariz perform too. He was at the convention up in Kitchener.
Tell me about that because it seems like you do a lot of the table card magic, which so many of us love so dearly. I know I'm like obsessed with it. I do anything I can to perform that kind of magic. And but talk to me about how watching Tamariz change things for you or what it opened you up to.
It's interesting because for the performance that I'd seen of him on video never translated for me. And I don't know if it's a language barrier or whether it's just that magic is meant to be seen live or whatever or maybe I just wasn't at the right place to see it at the right time. But seeing him live was in the show, it was incredible, right? It's card magic only. He does an hour show for hundreds of magicians and the lay public, if I'm not mistaken, there too. And just fooled time and time again. Like the variety in is like one of those shows where it's like the time passes instantly. The show starts and then it feels like it ends, and it's an hour plus of just card magic. Got to go up on stage during that for part of his like close-up sequence that he does in his show, where he's borrowing all the decks of cards, and like I get my deck of cards. The one thing I saw him do during the trick was like one secret move to collect the aces on top of the deck, and then that never got used, and so the deck was just returned to me with the and you're like, either he's so far ahead in so many situations, or it was very clear that I understood that he knew that I knew at that moment. I don't know, whatever the case may be. I still have that deck of cards with the aces gathered on the top that were never used. But yeah, and then later that night, of course, like for anyone who's had the chance to see him perform, he comes out at in the middle of the night and does one of these like super super late night sessions where he sits at a little table and people pile around, and that's when he really shines. I mean, everyone's sitting down by the pool around one of those tables, and I mean, your memories of it are always kind of hazy, and I mean that's the beauty of it, that you have these memories that of things that never happened, so they're perfect memories of magic. And yeah, we finished watching that, and me and my buddy Leon were sitting there, you know minds blown, and we stole the chair that he had been sitting in,
Yeah.
the pool chair. So I apologize to whatever hotel that was in Kitchener, but we still have one of your pool chairs because we channeled the inner energy of Tamariz by sitting in it.
Oh my gosh. You're taking all these artifacts left and he touched. That style of magic, sitting around a table, doing card magic, interacting with people in this like live. I don't know. I guess I don't know why I said live, but I mean maybe lively. It's unlike any other type of magic. At that point, did you already have some sort of formal table card magic or not really?
No, at that point I was doing primarily at that point I was primarily just performing for friends and family, so it's mostly what I guess would be considered like walk around appropriate magic where it's smaller pieces, but that type of magic where you see tricks that are layered one on top of the other, methods for one tricks cancel out something for the next, payoffs that come, when there's 10 minutes down the road and you have 5 decks of cards on the table and there's a payoff where you thought all those things were, out of play at this point in time. You try to recount it, and in recounting it, you never describe him touching the cards, and you're like, well, that
Right.
that can't be true,
That
but
couldn't have
but
happened.
that's exactly what it feels
Yeah.
like. But yeah, so that style of magic is contagious.
Let's continue on the journey. So you had some game changing experiences, whether it was going to Tannins or discovering Paul Harris books or watching Tamariz perform. All these wake ups to the world of magic. Let's talk about effect selection. We'll dive into
Mhm.
Fool Us a little bit in a moment, but on both of those appearances, you chose challenging sleight of hand card magic to do and also unique presentations to do them with. And so talk to me a little bit about how you think about your presentations and what kind of effects stand
Yeah,
out to you.
I guess for those two particular instances, the first effect for the folks who haven't seen it is a version of the trick called Call to the Colors. And it's almost like a pseudo gambling routine without having to know game because you're using gambling sleights for a
Gambling.
non-gambling type
Yeah.
demonstration. And that's one of those tricks that like, I
Yeah.
definitely fell in love with just for the sake of practicing it because
So fun to do and pull off.
it really is. I mean, I know they said it's like you need the audience for magic to
Yeah.
exist, but gosh, you can practice that one and and smile sitting in a room by yourself because you're like, huh, what? Why does
Wow, it
it
worked.
worked? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. which is quite enjoyable, and that's actually that's a good example of coming back to a book later on. Based on that book is Bill Simon's Call to the Colors, or based on a John Scarney thing with only 6 cards, and then eventually Bill Simon put it the whole deck of cards, and then Guy Hollingworth expanded it so that you could have the full suit revelation at the end. It's one of those things that like I had read in Guy Hollingworth's book the first time around that I read that book, and it wasn't something that I had practiced any of the necessary sleights for, so I had passed it by as nothing. And then giving that book a second or third read later on, and you come across that, and you've now worked on certain moves that allow you to do it. You find new stuff in the library you already own. But yeah, that was a trick that I had really practiced, and it was one of my favorites. And I thought that it was one of the more interesting ones because there at that point there hadn't been someone on the show that had done, I guess like false dealing. There hadn't been at that point until I showed up, and you're like walking in the lobby,
Right.
and Richard Turner is walking through the lobby, and you and that's when you immediately feel like you're the second string pick. You're like, huh, wonder what he's gonna do. But yeah, so that was definitely a routine I worked on without really having a presentation for, and sent in a demo of it, and they said, yeah, we'd love to have you come. And then one of my good friends was like, ah, great, what are you gonna say? Yeah, had a lot of help from. There's a really good. So I live in Orlando now, and there's a really good magic community here in Orlando, and so I had a lot of help from friends. One of my good buddies, Steve, pointed out to me, he's like you have to tie in the fact that you used to teach math and that you have this connection with math because he's like there's a truth to like why you enjoy performing the trick, and you might as well explain that truth to people in it. So
That's great. One of the challenges with magic is to like be honest, be honest, because like we're deceiving. So like anytime we can actually find the truth and share it in magic, the audience feels that, but it's often hard to find what that thing is. So that's great.
yeah, I agree. It's like the presentation seemed obvious at the end for me, but it was not. It took like friends and friends watching it over and over until they're like, "Gosh, say something that's slightly more interesting for me." So
And what about the other one in terms of effect selection?
yes, second trick was a version of Henry Evans' 10 exact cuts, and that was once you have friends who kind of understand what you like. It was one of my other buddies down here, Eric, who that was not a trick I performed, and he's like, "Oh, you should really go pick this trick up." He's like, "That's right in your wheelhouse. It's basically, see how many times you can deal cards out on a table." And but no, I do really enjoy it, and it's there's a pseudo like math feel to it. Not that I like strive for that, but it is appealing to me. And so spent a long time trying to work on ways to kind of make that my own. One, because I feel like Henry's routine is like so established within him that I mean, he did it in FISM and stuff, and you're not going to do it better than he did it. So you have to at least find something that you feel like you can tweak a little bit to make it your
Mhm.
own.
One of the things that stood out a lot about both of those performances, and it's one of those passions about close-up card magic and tabled card magic, is this ability to build pacing and rhythm. And when you have something like revealing 13 cards in a suit, it's challenging because it's challenging. You can't really reveal them one at a time because by the seventh card, they're kind of like tired of, they know what's coming. But also you can't just lay them all out at once because
Yeah.
you want to squeeze the juice out of a moment and out of a response and get every moment out of it. And that's something that I feel a lot in doing close-up card magic. I mean, the time that it's been worded the best is I recently finished Tamariz's new book, not new but translated, and he talks about rhythm in there and pacing and timing. And it kind of just helped me see the light watching your act and watching you perform. It's clear that you've had to think about those things, right? Like, you
Oh, that's
yeah,
vital.
you have a piece of magic which is structurally it's impossible, but then you get to a situation like, just for example, the one I described where you've got 13 cards in a suit and like you can't put them out one at a time and you can't put them out all at the same time, and you kind of have to figure out the pacing of
Yeah.
that. So talk to me a little bit about the pacing, the rhythm, the crescendo, and all of that.
Tamariz has one of my favorite passages about that, where he talks about counting cards on television, and he's like, you have to count down to whatever the numbers. You have to count down to 40, and he's like, you start out with 5 million viewers, and by the time you get to 10,
Right, right.
you're down to 2 million viewers, and
Yeah.
by the time you get to 20, you're down to half a million. By the time you get to 30, you're down to 20 people. By the time you get down to the final number where you're going to reveal the card, it's just your mom watching at home. So yeah, you really think about how you can what variations you can have, both in terms of in tempo of action, in terms of your voice and your rhythm and your own personal excitement. All those things can kind of build to where each thing truly is building. And I guess like the other thing is too is making sure that you're starting out slow enough that you give yourself the space to build to truly crescendo, so that you don't start out at 100 and you can't go anywhere and it sounds the same the whole time. So
Were you worried about going into a stage size like Fool Us, about being able to, have everyone on every beat with you? I mean, we're talking about something a little bit hard to understand. I know you understand, but I don't want to get too crazy for people that don't do the type of magic we're talking about.
in a close-up setting, there is an energy from having people around you, right? So I guess like whether I was worried or not for like the stage setting there, no, not at all, because that it's such a large audience with people cueing people to laugh. I mean, you think it's the funniest you've ever been in your life. I mean, things that people applaud louder than you've heard before, people laugh harder than you have before. And also it's in those situations, it's really comforting for me to bring people to the table. So in both situations, I brought three people
Right.
to the table, and I'm truly performing for them, and really hoping to have their reactions translate to the audience at large to make that enjoyable. So that's a very different scenario than trying to do that in an actual like live show where your audience is also everyone in the crowd, because in this case people understand that we're taping it for a show, so there's a little bit of at least, I mean, I didn't obviously talk to everyone, but I hope there's a little bit of forgiveness if I focus more on the folks who are at the table than the people who are there. So
That's interesting. I did not think about that. Think about it like that. I thought about sort of, doing close up on stage. But you're right. It's kind of a different beast for a live taping of a show like that. Before we press record, we started chatting about how you've been slowly dipping your toes in the stand up magic waters, and sort of like I just said, there's this entirely different feeling doing stand up magic than it is building that atmosphere in close up magic. It's a different kind of atmosphere, or maybe I haven't figured it out yet, or whatever, something along those lines. So, can you talk about sort of how you're figuring that out or dealing with that in the real world?
Yeah, it's this idea of like I'm primarily taking material that started for myself close up at a table and thinking about ways that you have to change the handling, change the pacing of what you're saying to make it play s- to make it play stand up. When I've had the chance to do like the close up gallery or the Magic Castle, the opening trick I do is a version of Triumph, and it's a tabled version that I think is much stronger than the version that I do stand up now. But the premise of the trick is working against a stopwatch. And to make that play stand up, I had to take the version of Triumph that I'm doing and completely scrap it because the method was meant to be in the two different performing scenarios. So it's like you have to pick out methods that one takes everything off the table, two takes displays from this kind of horizontal people looking down to the vertical plane. So whether that's having a stand or like a wine glass to put things in, or that the displays, instead of spreading the cards at your waist, you're spreading the cards out towards the audience so they're facing everyone so they can see them. I mean, all of this is like me paraphrasing and probably butchering techniques that Giobi writes about wonderfully in his stand-up card magic book, or in like in card in general.
One of the things is like you are figuring it out right now. Like as we speak, you're going through this process that many people have struggled through before. I mean, there's still a lot to the lessons that you've independently learned.
Yeah, and so I think it's the other kind of like overarching piece that happens in all these things is that I realize that my scripting needs to be tighter, needs to be a little more concise in what I'm saying, because the some of the byplay that you have, or at least for myself, some of the byplay that I have when I have people around a table with me just doesn't translate. Even if I have people standing up on stage with me, it's just not quite the same as when the whole group feels like they're at the table with you. And slowly now getting into the space where I've started to kind of expand this, you expand your toolbox, so you have techniques that don't work close up that I need to wrap my head around. Like I need to be taking advantage of that when I'm doing stand up. Like the fact that when you set a card down on the table in a stand up situation, it basically vanishes for people. Now that in my mind started out as a complete detriment, but there are a lot of advantages to that. That like if you set a deck of cards on the table, it becomes pretty easy to switch things in and out. That becomes very, very clean. That's been like a change in my mindset, and then change or something something that I'm still working on. I've got like half an hour that I'm pretty happy with, but still working on, and it's been valuable. I mean, Coaster's always something he knows that I like doing stuff at the table and like doing the close up, and he just said, but if you if you want to work more, work on your stand up, and he's like, then I can book the stand up, and then we can upsell, and you can do close up for him. So he's like, learn stand up and you can do more close up. So
I can get you more close up gigs, but you're not gonna like how. What are some of the lessons that you've learned about scripting, and how do for me, when I started doing stand up, it felt like I had to relearn everything I thought I knew about scripting and writing and performing magic. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you search for like the way you described it earlier was great, which was, what a great trick you're going to do on Penn and Teller Fool Us, and what are you going to say, right? So talk to me about how you've been working with that.
I think I try to think about first, hone in on what is the effect that I want to transmit to the audience, right? Because everything you're saying and doing should help build towards what that effect is. So if you're doing something that doesn't add towards that, get rid of it. It's not worth it, right? It's most likely going to be confusing for other people or boring. So either way, it's not worth it. So I guess functionally, what I do a lot of times is start out, and I think a lot of people do this, is just record yourself, perform it the way you're doing it, record it. All the stuff that you find boring when you're listening to it is probably really boring for everyone else as well. They're going to be key things that you're like, oh, that sounds all right, or that got a laugh, or whatever the case might be, and write it down. You want to make sure you say that again and tweak it a little bit to get like slightly better response. Thinking about what the effect is and what the premise is gives you kind of the direction you're going for each one. I think it's in the Pete McCabe books. He's got those the great scripting magic books, and he like one of my favorite pieces of advice that he has for it is give the trick a title that you can say to an audience, right? So not the trick that's like the magician title that like has some clever pun that
Triumph or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, right.
or exactly, or something that's like very coded for magicians, or something that's like really clever that makes magicians laugh, but something that you would say that an audience member could repeat to someone else and they would know what the trick is about. That has been helpful. So like the 10 exact cuts, the fact that you that I can refer to that as exact cuts is both is it makes sense. That I can that both tells you something about the trick that both magician and non-magician can walk away knowing.
It's like the idea that like if you can't describe it in a sentence, it's probably a little too complicated. I want to dive a little bit more into the world of close-up card magic and sort of what we can share with people who either don't live in that world right now or want to or are excited about it. What are some of the keys for you, let's say for walk around card magic? What are some of the keys for you for interacting with people, for perform, there's obviously a lot more limitations when you're standing up. Often if it's cocktails, like, they're holding stuff in their hands, and what's some advice or some keys to being able to perform magic standing up?
I do a lot of walk around and a lot of strolling like cocktail situations, and I do primarily card magic. So and I know plenty of guys who are in this same type of thing, and it is one finding I ever at least for myself, it's finding card magic that I can get into quickly, so that it's low on procedure at least to begin with until I have a group that's invested in what I'm doing and is in that walk around situation. Like you're coming into someone's environment, so it's making it interactive instantly is usually been more exciting. So like a lot of times I'll do a version. Garrett Thomas has a trick that I think he calls "lie to me," but it's basically like a thought of card in a location. There's a revelation of one card and a thought of card location, but a great premise of having someone lie to you, like walking up to a table and introduce myself as the magician, and then asking right away, like before having a card picked, asking who in the group has the best poker
People
face.
start pointing at each other and stuff,
Exactly
or
right. You
like,
get people interacting with each other. They think about themselves, or if there's no response, like no one plays poker, then it's you can easily back out to, well, who would be the most fun to see lie in this group. You're giving people a really easy entrance into the conversation of what we're doing together. When I would teach, that was always the thing too, that you have an opening to the class that regardless if a kid's missed the last 2 weeks, that the opening hook is at a point that everyone can engage in and everyone can have an opinion about. Pull them in just for a little bit, then you can hook them for the rest of it. In terms more of like the actual choices of magic that I perform doing walk around is being things that you have multiple ways in and out of. So
oh,
whether if you
interesting.
normally have a card selected, if you can just have a card peeked at, if you can have, because all of a sudden someone's hands are full. If someone shows you the card, do you have a way to continue the routine if you know the card versus not know the card? If someone wants to shuffle the deck, I always want them to shuffle the deck if they want to, right? Because it's one, they're then interacting with me, and two, whatever happens, we'll feel better because of that trick, or because you're allowing them to do that.
You mentioned having multiple ways to do things. Is that something that you figure out in advance, or is that something that you sort of figure out in the field?
I think it's a little bit of both. So one, you practice ahead of time all the techniques that you have in your tool belt. So say like, okay, if and this goes for formal sit down too. Knowing every way a trick can go wrong is great. For a while, I was doing like a table set where the cards would be out on the table. I'd have two audience members seated at the table before I walked out. Then I would walk out, take out the cards, start the whole thing, and then at the very end, the cards would be spread out on the table. And I thought, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, how like nice and full circle that is. The cards start on the table, we open them up, and they end spread across the table. full deck order, like you feel like you've come full circle. And I walk out there and someone's just sitting, one of the audience members just sitting there chatting away,
Oh
shuffling the
my
cards, and
gosh.
you're like, that is gaffed and was stacked,
Oh
and
gosh.
and
Guess you did
so
a different show
and,
that night.
yeah, 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 yeah. So you do some different stuff, but it is being prepared for, yeah. So in walk around situations, it just means that, like, if I'm at a table and I have someone select a card, and I guess this happens with like younger kids. You have one card selected, and all of a sudden they want four cards
Right. You're like,
selected.
okay, I guess I'm
Be,
doing a 4 card trick now.
exactly, yeah. Just I feel like it is, at least for me, it's always more fulfilling, or it always has a better conclusion if I'm willing to go with the flow
Totally.
of what the table wants to do.
What
Um,
a great piece of wisdom in walk around magic is like, if somebody has a want, like, here, let me shuffle. Like, oh, can we all pick a card? Like, go ahead. And one of the things that I've seen is like, the more you move to stage, the less you have to rely on that tool belt. Like, you kind of just do the effect with the method as it is. But in close up, because people can interact and take the cards and ask you to can we all pick a card, and like anything like that, you have to rely more on all the skills that you've ever accumulated in close up magic. One of the fun overlaps between math and magic for me, which I love, is in math. Like, at any point in math, any question that you're asked can use anything you've ever learned in math up until that point. Like, you could say, oh yeah, I forgot the equation for a circumference of a circle. And the same thing is true in magic, where like, I never diagonal palm shift, but every now and again, if I have to, I'm glad I know it.
sure,
I'm glad I have
sure,
it.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, it's always like the most important thing is to have fun, and I feel like, again, I'll misquote it, but that when Tamariz talks about, if you ever make a mistake or something goes wrong, you need to force yourself to get happier in that moment. Like, like it is a stacked deck, and someone says, "Can you shuffle the cards?" You say yes, and you
Yes.
you think to yourself, how wonderful this is, because now this is going to be
Yeah.
more amazing. You convince yourself
What
that it
an
is happier.
yeah. What an amazing challenge. This is so much fun. It's going to be better. Oftentimes people have beliefs in magic that are just not true. And one that I used to have and I sort of shed in my close up world, and I haven't really shed in stand up, is that lots of card tricks are boring and monotonous, and that people want other things. And I'm sure you've been asked in a close up magic, like, oh, do you do anything other than card tricks? But I also know that you've been able to perform for people in close up and table magic settings where doing card tricks is more than enough, right? So talk to me a little bit about that. Is there a monotony that we can avoid if we are staying strict to something like card magic? Does it even exist? Anything like that?
You're absolutely right that it comes up. Oh, you only do card tricks, and you try to preemptively break that by doing something that is very strong, so the feeling doesn't even happen. In close up, I guess it doesn't happen as much because the interactions, or like in strong situations, the interactions are relatively short. It's less frequent during the actual performance, and then maybe more frequent in the conversation with them afterwards. In my case, if I'm really short on time, and it's like, the real positive answer I have for them is that, like, I work with a team of magicians here in Orlando, and everyone kind of specializes in different things. So we 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 have guys who do mentalisms, so I sell them on the show that they're going to come and see all sorts of good stuff. But I think, in terms of actually doing your own show, if you truly, like in my case, it's not that I ever set out and say, "Oh, I'm only going to do card magic," but it's just what I really enjoy, and that I have the most available for myself to work with. I think it's like you have lots of really good examples of where this already happens very, very well. Like, no one finishes watching Danny or Woody or Tamariz perform, and you don't say,
It says, "Ah, just cards."
yeah. Same way, like, you see a really good concert of someone playing the violin, and you don't say, "Oh, well, do you,"
Any
yeah,
other any other
and
people in your band?
yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, it's like Tamariz has this exact quote where he's like, no one comes up to me and said, "Oh, but do you also play the piano?" No, no one does that. If you've done it really well, and I think, like, doing it really well means thinking about the effects that you're performing, thinking about the emotions that are connected with each effect, thinking about the length of the effect, so you've got variety.
Yeah, variety. I think that's a big one with it. Like, we're trying to break the idea that card tricks are all the same, and like variety is we can do a lot with card magic, and we got to make sure, we've all seen a mentalism show where it's just, someone predicting things 50 times in a row. We have to make sure that our card magic isn't finding their card 10 times.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. There can be monotony in any show. There can be monotony in an illusion show if it's not structural. There can be monotony in coin magic. There can be even if you're changing props every single trick, there can be monotony in it if the effect hasn't changed, if the presentation hasn't changed, if the tempo of it hasn't changed. So that there are lots of different things that can provide variety to a trick other than the prop itself.
I'm talking to both myself and anyone, struggling with it, is we have examples of people being able to do it, whether that's something that one is saying to themselves, like, oh, I've got to do other stuff, like people think it's boring, or like you said, you hear enough people say to you, like, do you do anything that isn't card tricks, like makes you say, like, maybe I should. But I think you're right, and I think you gave some great advice about, starting really strong, and just because you're doing magic with one type of prop, it doesn't mean that you can cut any shorter on the thinking or the effect
Yeah.
selection or it's not a shortcut to any of that.
For stand up, another thing that's been helpful for me is to think about other anchors that I can have within the card magic that makes each of the tricks feel kind of like its own thing. And so what I mean by that is like in the first trick I do, I use the stopwatch on my phone, and there's this like external piece to it. Though, while it's a card trick, it's easier for people to anchor the picture of a stopwatch going on. So the trick isn't the stopwatch, but that's an easy anchor. And like later on,
Yeah, if you say the trick with the stopwatch, it's different than the other, than a different
yeah,
trick.
or there's one where it's like just adding a blindfold to the trick can make that in your set the blindfold trick that gives it a very different feel than any of the other stuff. Regardless if you're doing, a coin trick blindfolded or a card trick blindfolded or whatever you want blindfolded, it gives it a different feel.
What a great piece of advice for, yeah, I mean, for me, for anybody, but for me, like, I'm thinking about different ways to bring more card magic to the stage, and something as simple as another, not even necessarily a prop that has any impact on the trick. It can be a blindfold, it can be your lucky stone, or a dice, or a timer, or anything like that, and it gives more identity to the trick, even if you're still doing card magic. So that's an awesome piece of wisdom to help break against that monotony that we might feel in doing loads of card magic.
It definitely gives you freedom to think about different presentations too, because I do a version of shuffleboard and spent a long time trying to think about how I can make that play a little bit larger in a stand-up situation. So probably I
Right.
spent a long time trying to get a magic 8 ball to tell each of the pieces so that someone would shake the magic 8 ball. Someone would do it in like the first reveal. Someone would shake it in the first reveal. The magic 8 ball would be able to answer each of the reveals. And so spent a long time like cutting open magic 8 balls and like sanding down the little inner die and like playing with like little plastic discs that cover the bottom part of it that give you like fake reveals and stuff, and then eventually scrapped that all and replaced it with that's the trick that I now use the blindfold for, and it's much stronger. So it's nice that the prop doesn't necessarily do the magic. So you have a little more freedom if it's not working to scrap something completely without losing the work of having learned the trick. I had a handling of it that I was very happy with in terms of the mechanics of getting spectators to shuffle so that everyone could see the shuffling happen. That's a point that was brought up to me too that I was missing, or that I guess I'm still working on in stand up, is not only do the reveals need to be off the table and at chest height so that they're visible for everyone. But if you're doing, I mean, any type of magic, particular card magic, but some of the process that is important for people to remember needs to be off the table and invisible. So like in shuffleboard, that's not secret shuffling, right? That's shuffling that the audience needs to remember that the audience shuffled the cards. And so that shuffling cannot happen. You can't do the normal like table wash or spectator shuffles the cards on the table, because only the two spectators who are there with you will feel that. And the audience needs to see them mixing it and see them doing it. So
That's great. Again, like it's sort of all of the things in the tool belt of figuring out how to make magic that's usually meant for close up, or magic that was maybe invented or created for close up, to bring it to the stage. And I loved what you were saying about props, and I loved what you're saying about which parts are the images that need to be remembered, and like those can't be things that are lost on a table, and because if it is, people won't remember it and you won't get the impact out of the effect. Like you said about using different props not as the thing that does the magic, but an addition. And what it does is these props end up being things that help define your character, which is great compared to a magician who's got 5 different props that do 5 different things that don't say anything about him. A magician who has cards but 10 different other props that he uses in conjunction with the cards, timers and blindfolds. Like those are all indicative of who that person is. Any other wisdom for bringing card magic to the stage? That's one of the things I'm currently struggling with. So this is, like I like to say with the podcast, secretly, I bring on guests to help me with things.
great.
Anyone else who listens to it is bonus. So any other advice for bringing card magic to the stage?
I just think that you have such like a wealth of card magic that exists out there. It's a great starting point to just take tricks that you like close up and go through the exercise of saying, okay, if I need to perform this in a group of 50 people, 100 people, how do I make sure everyone can really see this? You can think about like where how things need to be held up. This is all this is me talking too, where like I'm currently working on this, so this is me going through the process of getting better at it.
Right.
Even like some of my favorite authors, like when you read some of their material, you can see in their writing how like why they created the tricks. If you read Helder's version of Cards Across, he started with a David Regal trick that was cards in the envelope that would be flat on a table, and moved it into the vertical plane with the wine glasses, and that meant changing up the method completely, but the core the core was similar, and that the same starting point got to a place that from a close-up trick got to a place that was a stand-up trick.
That's great. I like the exercise, to take tricks you like and change them over. And I think, like you said, there is a big wealth of magic, close up, stand up, and there's work to be done here. So I love it. The last thing that I wanted to chat with you about is, we've spoken about a whole bunch of moments, obviously, in your journey that have been very impactful. Before we started recording, you said there was like a moment that was transition that changed the way you thought about magic. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What that was and how that happened?
Yes, I after in 2013, I moved to Madrid for a year, and that'll change your thinking about magic. So I mean, one, it's like my wife and I, we moved to, or we were just dating at the time. We moved to Spain specifically because of the magic. Love the thinking about like after seeing Tammany's performance, like I know like this is like a style of magic that I really like, and you go down to the rabbit hole, and there's like you know many performers in Spain who have this similar style of card magic that I really enjoy. And anyways, we ended up finding there's for anyone who's interested in doing this, I think they're still going. The program's called Auxiliares, or what would be the translation of helper, and it's a program run by the Spanish government, and you just need to be a native English speaker. You don't like probably by the way I said auxiliares, you know that I don't speak Spanish, or I mean not.
You said it like it's a Harry Potter spell.
Yeah, I don't. Like, the way that I know I don't speak Spanish is that for a year in Spain, I tried to cancel my internet on the phone, and after half an hour, I got one of my friends over, and they got on the phone. They're like, they thought you were trying to pay for your neighbor's bill, and I was like, ah, gosh, just get me out of this contract. But anyways, really great program. They place you in a school, and so they help you get a you're actually there on a student visa because you're considered as like part of a continuing education program, which is great. So you can only work 20 hours a week because it's not a work visa, and which gives you lots of time to hang out. And the magic scene there is unreal. There are at least 3 theaters that were there specifically for close-up magic, where it's like a table and maybe 50 chairs that are raked seating, so you can see down on the table. There are multiple magic shops. The magic club there, say, has meets every week. They have a dedicated space to meet, so it's not like they're meeting in a church basement. They rent out space and meet there every week. And you like walk in, and their tables covered with green felt, and people are hanging out and jamming on card tricks and whatnot. And you can have, like 20 to 90 people show up at one of those meetings, and you know, you've got Rafael Benatar, who's translated, tons of the stuff into English, will just show up and be hanging out. Camilo Vasquez, who's like one of the old guard, one of the guys. He won the same year that like Tamariz won for card magic, won FISM for card magic. He won for Closeup, and so I don't know how old he is now. Maybe he's like in his 70s or something. And you can still he'll at one of these little theaters. You can go and you can watch him perform. You watch him perform his whole show, and he closes with his Physimax still, at however old he is now. Like the Physimax that he did when he was 30, he does it flawless. He does it flawlessly still. He's like, watching your grandpa do, the triple lift flips off the deck and spins on top of the car. He does just mind-boggling stuff. And so yeah, there's magic there just all the time, and they have the same the same library that Tamariz talks about in the book Sonata. In the beginning, when he talks, like in the little intro, he says, "Thank you for letting me use this library." One of the other magicians there, when that magician eventually donated all of his books, and I believe the money for it as well, to a library in Madrid. So there's the Juan March Foundation, or Fundación March, and right in Madrid, that has theater, music, and magic books. And you can't take them out of the library, but it's a public library, so you can just walk in and you look up whatever you want on their database, and one of the librarians will bring it out to you, and you can sit there and you can read. I mean, they just a collection of thousands and thousands of books, um, and it's all the old circulars, so like all the the circulars that the Escuela Magia used to like put out. They have them all collected there. All the like when they run that convention, all the notes that they have are in that library. So if you want to read Pitt Hartling's notes on the Many Tekel deck that only went out to that convention, you can show up at the public library and read his thoughts on that.
Whoa.
And it's nutty.
Whoa. Well, you make me want to go even more. God damn it. God damn it. That's amazing. And it sounds like a transformative experience. Was there, when you left, you moved to Spain to be awoken, by the world of magic. It sounds like you were. What was the feeling when you left? Were you enriched? Was there something you went there looking to find and you found it? Anything to that end, or was it just was it like a year that was like a magic convention every day?
I guess a little bit of both. I mean, one, it was seeing. Yes, it was like convention all the time. There's this magic whenever you wanted to see magic, perform magic, jam magic. There were people that you could find to hang out and do it with, and it was amazing. Also, really just interesting to see a different culture around magic. So for me to be when I was at the school, like one of the first days I walk in there, and we're chatting with the other teachers and saying, like, what brought you here? And it's like, of course, it's like a great opportunity to travel and see different areas. But I said, primarily I wanted to come to Spain because of the magic, because Tamariz is a big influence for card magic. And the other teacher there, who's not a magician, just a teacher who grew up in Spain, she's like, oh, if you like his magic, you must like Rene Levin too. And I was like,
Oh my
you're
gosh.
like,
What
you're
a
like,
crazy thing.
get
What a
out of
crazy
here.
moment.
But of course,
Oh
yeah.
my
And then
goodness.
there are teachers there who would be talking about going out to go see a magic show on a Thursday night, you'd hear someone talk about going to a comedy club. Yeah, just lots of opportunities to make magic accessible, high quality magic accessible to the public, and fun to see that.
Do you think that it's coming for North America, or do you think it's another world,
I don't
another?
know if in that exact form, but it's definitely. I mean, everyone sees it now. There's a huge swing for magic. All the guys on. I mean, Shin Lim needs to get how many millions of views, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's magic is everywhere. It's tough for me to do a gig now, right, where someone doesn't bring up either America's Got Talent, Fool Us, Carbonaro. There's so many entry points into having seen magic in pop culture now, or in the world now. And like I've had people say, oh wow, I've had someone say, oh wow, I've only seen magic on Facebook. This is the first time I've seen it live. Like
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that a crazy sentence? What's so crazy about seeing magic on Facebook that's different than seeing magic on YouTube is you're just scrolling. So it just ends up, you just end up watching it. Like it's one thing to seek it out, it's another thing to be like, I was just doing nothing and then now I saw a trick. Like it's crazy.
I mean, in
What
all
a
fairness,
crazy
that guy was
world.
just at a restaurant and he was just eating, and then I walked up and did a trick. So it's maybe a similar experience.
That's true.
But he was happy.
You can't get surprised by magic anywhere. Well, unbelievable. That's great to hear, especially that part of the journey and how important and impactful it was, and kind of a reminder, as always, which this podcast is always for me, which is that different places around the world do magic differently, and it means different things in different places, and amazing that you're able to go to a place and have it be all that you dreamed of.
Yeah, the other reference point I'll give to folks who are kind of interested in reading more about it, because I know you've had like a variety of people kind of talk about the different schools of magic on the podcast. Giobi's got a great in that the book he put out, Ask Giobi, where people would write in questions, and he would send. It was, I think it was like originally like you would pay for it and you would like ask a question, he'd like respond once a week, and then after a year you get the collection of these. Anyways, the book's out there now and you can buy it, and it's like not super expensive because it's all in digital form. But he's got lots of great advice in that. But one of the questions that came up was someone specifically asking about what is the Spanish School of Magic, and he talks explicitly about the different schools of magic, and he talks about how Tamari's like originally um, like how Tamari's kind of talked about those different schools of magic early on, and they have a translation of the manifesto from when the guys started in the 70s, like collectively saying, okay, we are going to like be taking X, Y, and Z steps, and it's really cool to see that. It's a good read if you're interested into it.
I definitely have to check that out. As you know, we have some wrap up questions at the end of the podcast. And you told me you were excited for one of them because you got some answers. So I'm excited too. Let's start at the beginning. So, what is one thing in the current world of magic that you like, and something going on in the world of magic now that you don't like?
For myself, and this is not just the current world of magic. I think this is the world of magic for a long time. One of my favorite things is just the connections you have with people, like the friends that you're able to have, like the fact that I could any point in time in my life when I move somewhere, there is a group of people that we instantly bond over certain elements. And of course, there'll be people that will become better friends than others, but it's like I could move to Arkansas and find people that we instantly had so many common bonds. I could show up in New York City, and there are more groups of magicians than it's incredible. It's like so many people that you can like meet in like a city that's so big, and it's like hard to find and introduce yourself to people. It's like such a fun and easy way to make connections and hang out with people that have a shared interest. So that is one of the things I absolutely love.
Anything you don't like in the world of magic right now?
No.
Great.
No, really no. It's like there are like aspects of the world of magic, like I aspects of it that like I'm not as involved in, but I love them all. Like I love the stuff that you see online. Like people are creating like
Yeah.
incredible special effects stuff online, and like you know what? If you can't do it live, I don't really care. I know you didn't like when you had Mario Lopez talking about that, like him like talking about like bringing specific ideas to life that didn't have a venue before, and now there is this venue. I'm like, oh, like well put. That's great. Like I don't expect to see that in a show, but I get to see it here, and it's really really cool.
What a great view. The next thing is the endless chain. So, in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest. You said you have a few. You're welcome to give me a few. Who should we absolutely have on this
Yes, I was excited for the endless
podcast?
chain because I'm gonna give you your own endless chain to add to your
Oh,
original endless
beautiful.
chain. No, so I live in Orlando now, and there is a whole host of magicians here in Orlando. I think you could do, or in Florida in general, you could do a whole Florida tour if you wanted to. I know that other folks have recommended, or I know that, like I think Adam Rubin recommended Costa before too, but Costa, I know that tons of your listeners would get a lot of all the good things
Yeah,
he has to
he'd be
say.
great.
He's been instrumental in helping me perform a lot. But there are all sorts of guys. So One of my other really good friends here in Orlando is Steve Bedwell, a magician who I think you'd be interested in chatting with because he transitioned from being a medical doctor into being a full-time performer.
Whoa.
And so that's an interesting journey. And like, you like won gold cups back in the day, and so he's got
Mhm.
some cool stories and some really good stuff. And he helped me a lot with scripting and for both of the Fool Us performances. So good guy to think about what to say. Another guy that's down here that I feel like you'd be interested in too is there's a magician who's Terry Ward, who's been at Disney. He's been a performer there for I'm probably underselling it now, but I think like over 20 years now. He works at Hollywood Studios and has a character Diamond Jack and does like street performances and is just incredible, incredible, incredible. Our local club's namesake is Bev Bergeron, and he lives here in Florida, right in Central Florida. And Bev was Rebo the Clown on Mark Wilson's show Magic Land of
Oh,
Alakazam.
cool.
So if you, if you he might be a trip on a phone interview, but he he's like old school show business,
Cool.
and is a clown at heart, I think. So he would be a funny guy to talk
Oh,
to,
that's great.
but is like, I think he was like Magic Castle member number 10 or something, or single digits or something. So he's got stories of like doing
Right.
shows with like where him and Vernon were out and like performing stuff. So like lots of old school shows. Bob and Val Swaddling are down here. But so Bob Swaddling invented the flipper coin,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, and has done some incredible stuff. And his wife Val, also an incredible magician in her own right, who's like, you know, competed and placed in FISM and stuff. So there's old footage of her destroying on the FISM stage, and I even laughed because in the new translation that they did of Pepe Carroll's book, 52 Lovers, he in the beginning is talking about watching a performance, and he's talking about watching a performance at FISM, and he's talking about watching Val Swaddling's performance. So it's so funny that like I had waited so long to read this book because that used to be a really tough book to get until the reprint, and like within the first 5 pages, it talks about someone who's like sitting in my backyard. So I just laughed and it's like I should just go chat with the people that are around here.
Oh, that's so funny.
Could branch off into get you into like a different realm of performers is my buddy Brian Miles, who's a mentalist in South Africa that I worked at a summer
Oh,
camp
cool.
with a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
But he teaches at the College of Magic over there.
Yeah, the
He
South African magic community is crazy good.
Yeah, and
I
he did
keep seeing the most amazing stuff
they
coming
do
out of
some
there.
really cool stuff, and
Yeah.
there'd been a push to do some like original content on TV. So he got to do the other year like television, like a multi episode television show called One Day, and he's got
Oh, cool.
it'd be really fun to have him chat about that because that's like content that he's made. Like you can watch the full episodes online. So it'd
Oh,
be fun to
cool.
have him chat and hear about him going through that. So,
Amazing.
anyways,
Well, I love it. You've done my homework for me, which is great. And I'm very, very excited.
good,
The
good.
last parts is this. Number one is the take home point. So we've been talking about magic for over an hour now, talking about card magic, close up card magic, some intricate things like the crescendo of a close up card magic trick. And things that many people are challenged by, which is bringing card magic to stage, or bringing magic to stage, or thinking about your magic in different ways. What was a highlight for you? For me, the highlight was really hearing you talk about some of the moments that changed things for you, and a lot of the maybe common beliefs that people have about card magic, like that it's monotonous and things like that. Some solutions to avoid that. That was really some memorable parts for me. What about for you? What do you think is the most important take home for people listening?
Yeah, I think an important take home, yeah, is just that you don't have to let other people define whether the card magic is too much or whether whatever it is that you're doing is too much. That you can find and tweak different areas of it that allow, if it expresses what you want it to express, you can find ways to bring that across to other people. So
I love it. And last and not least, where can people find you? And if people want to see you perform in Orlando, where can they go? How can we make that happen?
yeah, absolutely. So you can check my. I mean, I've got a website, jimmyichihana.com. You can also see if you go to cmagiclive.com/Jimmy, and most of my public performances are in Orlando. So you can like coming up on end of September 28th. If you're in Orlando, I'll be doing a show. Coach and I'll do the first half. Coach will do the second half of it. But if you follow the C Magic Live page, you can see whenever we're doing our shows there. And then for any folks who are in Shanghai, I'll be in Shanghai in November for the Magic Festival over there. So if you're in Shanghai, come out to the Magic Fest, or if you're not, travel out there, come hang out. We're gonna have some fun.
Booyah. And the last thing, which I forgot, but I'm excited to just bring up very quickly, is that you are the Magic Convention man of Jam With You a Bunch, and you wanted to make sure to mention Buffalo, either
Oh
the convention
yeah.
or just the people out there. Tell us a little bit about why you. I know Madrid is great, but tell us a little bit about Buffalo.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, yeah, you can't forget close to home.
Of course not.
There is just a crazy number of really, really strong magicians in the Buffalo area. So, the Forks Hotel back in the day was in Buffalo, and there are still the 4Fs convention is there. And then there's also John, the first place I met you was at Buffalo 52
Yeah,
or the Buffalo
Buffalo.
Get Together. So Buffalo 52 is a little convention happens every October, and it is, yeah, there's just some incredible magic there. If you're driving through, like one of the guys who helps organize the convention, Dan Block, is if you could ever
Yeah.
convince him to talk, I'd love to hear him talk for an hour, but I don't know if that's possible. But it's guys who studied when the Forks Hotel was still around. So Dan spent a lot of time with Lou Gallo, guy who created the
Right.
Gallo pitch, and just has an aesthetic to his card magic that is beyond belief, just crisp, clean, really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
And like you said, that Buffalo 52 convention is a lot of people, like you said, they're not all stars on social media, but they're all stars in Magic, and it's pretty crazy to see some of the guys out there. So a reminder, like we mentioned, Madrid, Buffalo, there's amazing magic all over the world, and like you said earlier, which is such an amazing point, how lovely it is that we're part of this incredible community where we can land anywhere in the world and Google the name of that city and the word magic, and you'll find some amazing people who want to work together and help you grow together.
exactly, yeah. So friends in
What an
Orlando,
amazing.
come by, look me up when you're here, say hello,
Or go to
or go, yeah,
Orlando
come to
to
Orlando. Exactly.
yeah,
Come by and say
amazing,
hello.
amazing. Thank you, Jimmy, so much. This was a pleasure.
Thank
This
you,
was so
Jonah.
much fun and great to dive in. And of course, a big thank you to everybody who listened, joined us, learned a little bit about magic in the most intricate ways possible. Thank you for being here, and we will see you all next Thursday.
Well, there you go. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope that you learned something. It's a good strategy and a good exercise to think about close-up or smaller magic that you do and how you might bring that to a stage, whether that means changing a trick from 5 people to 50 people, or a trick that plays from 50 people to 100 people or 1,000 people. But brainstorming how you might be able to do that is very, very helpful. I hope you liked the episode. I hope that you learned something. Share it with the world. Spread the word. Tell somebody. Call a friend. And thanks for being here. And I will see you next Thursday.